Steve Robertson, I hope you're doing well, sir. Welcome into the game in Tuscaloosa.
Happy to be back, Ryan. Hope things are well with you guys.
No doubt. Let me get your reaction when you hear the news that Hugh Freeze is going to be resigning. What was the first thing that went through your mind?
Well, at first I thought maybe we were being punked because I didn't think he would survive this. Now, what I mean by this, I meant just, the NCAA probe, and I figured at some point, the boosters would kind of call in a marker and say, look, this is enough. Okay, we got to move on from here. Nobody's bigger than the program. Nobody's bigger than the university. And quite frankly, that had not happened until yesterday. The whole way through this, they stood behind them. They had thumbed their nose at the NCAA and been defiant publicly and kind of rallied their troops. And they were anything but contrite until yesterday. And, quite frankly, there's a lot of people out there that are going on Feinbaum and that really don't know anything about this case. They're just kind of getting up there and kind of regurgitating what they're reading. But I've been involved with Tom Mars and Houston Nutt since the month of June. I found that phone call on July the 5th, and it's something that I've kind of been sitting on for a while and kind of deciding how we were going to play this. But it's certainly a sad day in the Southeastern Conference that we had a sitting coach basically go through this whole Mike Price thing all over again, and it appears to be on probably a grander scale.
You know what's out in the public spotlight. Do you think there's more to it?
I don't think there's any question. And I think that Ross York, to his credit, was, granted they were kind of put into a corner. They didn't have a lot of room to maneuver there. Because when Tom Mars filed earlier this week, he filed an open records request for every phone record, cell phone and landline for Hugh Freeze since January 1 of 2012 through Wednesday. And once that took place, that really kind of put Ole Miss on the clock because they had a couple different options here. They could produce the records, which we were already certain had already been told were going to contain more embarrassing type calls of very adult nature, or they could fight to withhold the records or redact the records and face a legal challenge and make it look like they were hiding something, and ultimately it would have come out anyway. And so really the only out that Ole Miss had was the one they took, and that's to fire their head coach and just kind of come lay the cards on the table and say, look, his behavior is non-becoming of an Ole Miss Rebel and what we expect from our leaders within our athletic department. And so as a result, he's having to be let go. And he basically resigned in lieu of being fired because for the first time in a long time, somebody at Ole Miss shows a little bit of leadership here.
Well, you're talking right now to Steve Robertson at scout.com. It's genespage.com as he covers this case, and we've been talking about it. Let me ask you, because I know you've talked about it, I think you even did a podcast. I was reading through your Twitter feed a couple of minutes ago. When you look at how does this affect the NCAA case, what is your things? What's your thoughts?
I don't think it affects it at all. One of the things that took place when they first enacted the new penalty matrix is they were trying to kind of remove the old protocol of we're going to shoot our tails off, and if we get caught, we'll just fire the coach and say, hey, give us a break. So that's what's happened now is this new penalty matrix is to kind of remove some of that arbitrary nature of the enforcement process out of the investigation. And so now this is a situation, too, where it's kind of unique that Hugh Freeze was not fired or resigned in shame over some NCAA violation. He is resigning over his personal conduct. And so it's not like they've offered him up as a sacrifice. This is kind of a sideshow, kind of a bearded lady sideshow to the main event, which is the NCAA investigation. And I don't think they get any quarter in that respect. I think that they're still going to get absolutely hammered. And I know it's just so ridiculous that some people say, well, maybe we won't get the coaching responsibility or the lack of inconsistent control. Listen, these violations still occurred. And so you don't get a clean slate just because the coach leaves.
All right, let me spin this around, and maybe this is just my brain going the wrong direction. When you look at Hugh Freeze and you look at the NCAA, to me, I think they're both almost the same when we talk about the way they operate. Is there any chance that Hugh Freeze could be given immunity for some testify against? Because I think it's just deeper than Hugh Freeze. I think they'll try to throw him under the bus. They'll try to blame it all on Hugh Freeze. But is there any chance that Hugh Freeze cooperates with the NCAA, maybe even testifies, and maybe gets some kind of immunity in this?
Well, I've had a couple of people kind of propose that same scenario earlier today. And so here's the issue with that is, Freeze And if you look at the notice of allegations and the amended notice, either he knew or he should have known. And so I don't know in that respect if he adds a lot of value to their case. And, of course, he'll know where the bodies are buried. But you got to think, too, he's the one that resigned of his own conduct. It's not like that he was fired or scapegoated in this situation. It was a situation of his own making. So it's not like he has an axe to grind against Ole Miss in that respect. And so I think it's probably unlikely. I won't say that it's not impossible, but I'm not expecting a situation like that to play out. I think that Hugh Freeze will probably take us with him and then probably try to get a job somewhere else down the road, working, doing something else.
So going back here just for a couple of minutes, when you look at Hugh Freeze, how quick do you think he can get back in coaching? Or you think the NCAA will put this huge show cause on him that may not be able to get a job for a few years?
Well, I think that, number one, he will have a lengthy show cause. And I think also, too, there's a lot of stigma attached to him right now. Now, granted, he's won. And, won some big ball games for Ole Miss in a place that, quite frankly, is not the easiest place to win. So there will be some tangible benefits probably to somebody hiring him down the road. I don't know that he becomes the head coach anytime soon. He probably needs to rehabilitate his image. And quite frankly, right now, he needs to be focused on the fan base. That's first and foremost. Football should probably be third or fourth on the list. He needs to go find a way to get things reconciled with his family. We certainly hope he gets his life together. But I think, he'll certainly coach again. I doubt we see him as a head coach in this league. But I think that because of the fact that he has won, and he is a guy that certainly knows how to move the chains from an offensive standpoint, that he'll get an opportunity in some way.
All right, you are one of the ones who discovered that now infamous phone call in Hugh Freeze's phone records on July the 5th, because you have followed this case, and I'm sure there's a lot of moments that you go, wow, did this really happen? What was your thoughts when you discovered that phone call? Because you were one of the ones that sort of flipped over that stone. What was your thoughts when you go, is this really what I think it is?
Well, and for the interest of fairness, I was the one that found it, and my wife was second because I couldn't believe my eyes. And I never thought in a million years I'd be sitting here and asking my wife to pull up an ad for an escort service on our home computer just so she could confirm what I was looking at. I mean, it's one of the unique things that happens, I guess, in situations such as this. But, I just said, look at this and make sure my eyes aren't playing tricks on me. And then after she got the same result that I did, I called Tom Mars, who's the nut lawyer, and I said, hey, pull those original phone records. Because I thought, well, maybe I've hit a typo here, on a spreadsheet. Maybe somehow I have manipulated the number inadvertently. So I had him pull up the original document. I said, hey, take a look here and see what you see. And he reads the number back to me, and I said, go ahead and plug that into Google and see what you get. And then his response was kind of like, holy hell, And so he didn't need to say anything after that. We'd all kind of seen the same things. And so at that point, immediately there's this, what in the world are we going to do? We're almost like speechless. And then there's really kind of some sadness creeps in, because I begin to think about the magnitude and the ramifications of all of this. This gets public, and of course we had every intention of making it public, but we wanted to get some additional information. We want to give people the benefit of the doubt. But the more that we researched, the more people we talked to, we found that this behavior was not isolated when it came to Hugh Freeze.
Was there more than one phone call? I mean, because somebody that does this, I don't think this is just they're bored here. Was there other phone calls that had question, or was there really only one?
Well, on the 6 days of phone records that we had, we've only been able to identify one.
Okay.
However, we did speak to some other people once we had this information. And there was a former Ole Miss staffer that was contacted on Wednesday once the full record request was made on behalf of Houston Nutt's office about the rest of the records. And the former Ole Miss staffer, his words when he learned how far they were going back was, well, that's going to be a real problem. And so at that point, all of our suspicions were kind of, alleviated. We kind of had a real idea what was about to happen. And then once the Ole Miss found out that I had the records last weekend, and they began to kind of send some messages to the back channel, talks of potential lawsuits of painting their coach in a false light and things of that.
No, whoa, Steve, you mean Ole Miss was threatening you?
Oh, yeah, they sent Tom Mars an email, and then Mars shared it with me and one of the journalists that basically telling us that we should not go forward with this because it was a misstyle call and that we should be awfully careful not to paint one of their student athletes or their coach in a false light. And a false light is basically the little brother of a defamation suit. And quite frankly, it had the opposite impact on me. Rather than being scared, I realized we were on to something big. And it didn't take long for things to break loose once that happened.
Steve Robertson, I mean, I'm on the edge of my seat here. Let me ask you, when you hear last night the chancellor and the AD saying that there's a pattern of behavior, how do you think that came about?
Well, based on what I've told and what I believe is that once they realized they were going to have to release those records, they did their own investigation. They did their own review, and I understand they began to find some things, and they went and confronted the coach and said, "Hey, coach, look, we're seeing some things here kind of difficult to explain. What's your response to it?" And he at that point confessed to the behavior. And as I mentioned earlier in the call, for the first time in a long time, somebody has done the right thing at Ole Miss. And all this talk at SEC media days and spring meetings, all this rhetoric about, owning it, their mistakes that were made, but we own that. But they haven't owned anything up until now. And I think really until their hand was forced, they really didn't have any intentions of doing so. And what's so amazing about it, Ryan, is that it's one call, and all anybody had to do is Tom Mars had asked for a formal apology from Ole Miss for getting his name mixed up in the investigation when he was not a party to that. They refused to do that, cut off communication for as much as 2 months between lead counsel and Tom Mars. And then when the records are delivered, they had an opportunity to redact the records. They redacted 3 calls on January 19th, and they left that call in. And so you've got to think, if I'm an attorney that works for Ole Miss and I'm responsible for the distribution of these open records act, I'm probably updating my resume because they essentially gave the smoking gun to the attorney that was looking to do it.
Steve, are you disappointed in the word journalism? Right? I know you had to sort of stand up, but we've also watched some lack of journalists in that area. Are you disappointed in journalists who covered this?
Well, I used to be. And the way that I've looked at it now is it's really provided me an opportunity, kind of a stepping stone for me to kind of further my own career and to kind of expand my own brand. And here's the thing that I've told many people is that all I've done throughout this process is tell the truth. And then all of their denial and their insult and their inability to do their own job has made me a cult hero in this state. And if they had all just told the truth and faced this story as they should have, as they're charged to do as journalists, I'd just still be a regular recruiting guy getting ready to go cover a football camp. But instead, I'm prepared to meet all these national media people about the biggest story in college football.
You think there's more coming?
I don't think there's any question. I think now that there's blood in the water, people know that those phone records are acceptable. I think there will be any number of people now that will pile on. I could almost see a Tiger Woods situation if there are that many people that are, if there's that many people that comprise the pattern. I think there will be a lot more of this that's probably going to be very uncomfortable for everybody.
We are talking right now as we move forward. Steve Robertson, final few minutes here of the program. When you go back here just for a couple of minutes, I always think about the players, and I think about roles of media and the spin cycle that we were given, that it has nothing to do with the current football staff. I mean, you remember the stuff back prior to National Signing Day. I think it was that Friday prior to National Signing Day on a Wednesday. Should the NCAA step in and be given to these players the right to leave because they were lied to so severely?
Well, I think you could make that argument, but I also think on the flip side of it, the players have to have some accountability too.
Sure, you're right.
They knew that they were signing on with a program that was under NCAA investigation, and as we've seen, with some of the coaches that were recruited, and they've proven their word didn't mean a whole lot. And so I think in that respect, too, it's kind of a Pandora's box. But at the same time, there are other people, as you and I both know, probably didn't take anything, did not receive any impermissible benefits, just simply liked the school and like the coaching staff and thought it was a good opportunity, and now they're kind of trapped in a nightmare. And so I could see both sides of the coin, but I think especially the players who signed this past year, the class of 2017. I mean, at that point, there were no secrets. 2016, they threw it all under the bus with Houston Nutt and said Freeze and his staff wouldn't be implicated. But by the time this past year rolls around, it was pretty well documented that Ole Miss was facing some real trouble.
How big is the case with Houston Nutt in the lawsuit against Ole Miss?
Well, I think it's open and shut. Quite frankly, I don't know how Ole Miss has any wiggle room in it. They haven't specified damages in the case, but I mean, the phone records are what they are, and they all show that basically within minutes, in some cases hours, of Ole Miss releasing the statement that they could not comment publicly on the case and that they were bound by NCAA confidentiality. Within minutes and hours of that, everybody goes and gets on the phone and begins to kind of spread this false narrative. And there have been some media people that have cooperated, that have kind of explained, and in some cases shown text messages, to kind of show what was being said. And so I don't think that Ole Miss really has much of a defense in this case. And what's probably most disappointing to all the people is that you've got Hugh Freeze and Athletic Director Ross York having conversations with national media people that afternoon, rather than getting ready for an official visit weekend, the biggest weekend perhaps in Hugh Freeze's college football career. They're on the phone talking to Ed Ashoff and members from Fox Sports and ESPN and trying to make sure that their story gets out there. And listen, there's some of that to be had. There's no fault on the journalists in that respect, because they're taking the story and trying to get comment from the inside. And so there's no fault there. I don't fault any of those people, but I do fault these people that went out there and basically lied and tried to pin it all on Houston Nutt rather than just saying, hey, it's not that bad, we're going to be okay, it's not that big a deal, even though that would have been a lie. But when you go and impugn somebody else's character to deflect suspicion from yourself, that's taking things to a completely different level.
You made a comment earlier, and this will be my final question for Steve Robertson right now, genespage.com, scout.com. We opened up this program and labeled you and said we will be talking with you, so we're really excited to visit with you. You made a comment that this is one of the worst cases, scandals in college football history, even more than the SMU case?
Well, I think when you look at everything that's involved in it, the SMU basically, if I'm not mistaken, they had 3 cases in about 10 years' time. Ole Miss, of course, they've got a super-duper case here, really 2 cases in one, because many of these allegations date back to 2010. And I think if life was fair, they'd be in the repeat violator window and facing some really tough times. But when you look at the number of sanctions, and there's been 47 major infraction cases since SC went under the knife in 2010. When you look at the amount of allegations that Ole Miss is facing, you've got to go back almost to SMU to find a case that's comparable. And then you look at the academic fraud, and you look at the impermissible benefits, and you look at all the situations for pay for play. And so basically every tenet of our game, as far as amateurism goes, has been broken. And now on top of it, as theater, we can throw this sexual component on top of it. And so basically anything you wanted, you've been able to get.
Steve, do you think the next couple of weeks will be a calm period, or do you feel in your gut of gut that more that there's? I know you said there's more coming, but you see a timeline on that? I mean, is this something that we'll get a little closer to the NCAA hearing, or is this something that you think will be a slow drip coming out for the next couple of weeks?
Well, we're waiting for the booster names to be released. That's something, a battle I won in court last weekend with the State Ethics Commission to get the booster names released for the first time in school history. And then also, too, Ole Miss, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, if it's not in possession, should be in possession very soon of the NCAA's answer to announce their position on Ole Miss's answer to notice allegations. So that could come out. So we should have some news on those 2 fronts. But as far as what could possibly come from those phone records, I would suspect that over the course of the next 10 days, there will be a lot of people digging through their phone records and probably unearthing some things that are very, very uncomfortable.